And so it is. We're talking about events. We talked about how events, we're going to talk about bubbling first. Talked about how we have this nested HTML that when it gets parsed as the DOM becomes this tree. And then if I click on this right here, that click event also happens on the nav, also happens on the header, also happens on the body, also happens on the HTML. So question was, what is a practical use case for like why we would want to take advantage of event bubbling? I'll give you one. So I have these LIs down here. Let's say I click on this LI. Cool. Well, that click is going to bubble to the UL, bubble to the nav, bubble to the header. Cool. All right. Well, what if I want a handler for all of them? If I click on any LI, I want it to do something. All right. Well, I can loop through each of these nodes. I can do like a query selector all and get all of those LIs and then add event listeners to each one of them. All right. Well, what happens when I use some DOM manipulation to make another LI and add that? Ooh, that didn't get the event listener. I could add the event listener to it. That's certainly allowed. But what if I have 10 of these, 100 of these, 1,000 of these, 1,000,000 of these? Event listeners also aren't free. They have some overhead in your browser. And so having 10,000 event listeners, it adds up. So what I could do instead is I could put the event listener on the UL. And then since that's a shared ancestor, anytime I click on one of these ULs, it's also going to bubble up to that UL. And now I can read the thing that originated the event. I can read an ID off of it. I can do whatever for a specific behavior that I want that to have. That's called event delegation. Instead of having an event listener for every single one of these little things, I have one event listener. And any of its children, I get a chance to intercept that. In this program, that's probably the only real case of event bubbling that you're going to deal with is something like that. Oh, although I take that back. There's one on the Mod 4 code challenge that trips people up. That's the other like really common use case for this. And that one is you have some kind of like component or form or something like that, that this has an event listener and this has an event listener for the same event, like a click or something like that. And when you click on this, you don't want this one to fire. I guess that's less bubbling and preventing bubbling, but you can like put up a little bubble fence around this thing to keep it from accidentally triggering it. That's another kind of interesting thing about events. They're way simpler than you might be making them out to be in your head. So I take some action on a DOM node. That action has a name. It's a string, like click, or mouse over, or sorry, mouse in, mouse out. All that happens in this bubbling process, it goes, hey, one of your kids did a click, did a mouse in. Just that string. When you do an event listener, like add event listener, that first thing that you pass in, that's really like all that's happening there is that string label. It's one of the reasons that people think DOM events are bullshit. Like, it's things like this. Just because this is a click and this one's listening for a click, why does that assume they're listening for the same thing? Well, they are. Ask me more questions about this idea.
So if like a parent is awaiting the same event, like a click, but has a different function, would they both execute if it bubbles?
Yep. That's what this problem is. I have a click handler for this, but I technically also clicked on this outer box. So this is also listening for a click, but what I really want is any click that wasn't on that button. I got to handle that a little bit differently.
If the higher ups, like the parents and ancestors, aren't listening for that click event though, and they do have event listeners, they won't trigger unless it's the same type then, correct?
The same name of the event.
Same name
So
of the event.
clicks are the same everywhere. A click is just the string CLICK. But if I mouse over this inner one, that mouse over event is like going to trigger all the way up the chain too. But if nobody's listening to it, who gives a shit?
Do you think it's good practice to put in like a stop propagation for every event listener?
No. That's just going to confuse some other developer who's wondering why the hell that event isn't bubbling. It doesn't make it any more like performant or anything like that.
So going back to the event delegation piece,
Yep.
if you had that event listener on the UL, if you're clicking on the LI, is that technically still like the event target?
Yes. Yeah, that doesn't
So you
change.
would just pull out like event.target and that would give you that it was the specific LI that you were looking for?
Correct.
Could you say that again, Bryce?
So when you click on the child element of where the event listener is, the event target is still going to give you back the child instead of the parent where the event listener is located.
Correct.
Gotcha.
That's why it's event.target, not just something else. Event.target is the original like bottommost DOM node where this originated. That was the target of the event. And that gets passed up through all the bubbling.
The event target is still the LI, but the event handler is in the UL?
Exactly. That's the delegation part.
So when writing that, how does that, do you still write like ul.event at event listener? Or do you have to, okay.
But you need to do some conditional logic then to see what was triggering the original event. Because now clicking on those LIs, that will trigger the click event. Also, you can still just click on the UL, not on a particular list element, and that'll also trigger the same event. So we got to have a conditional in there to make sure that we're working with the thing that we think that we're working with.
So if you were doing like an expandable nav button that was on click, it would have probably just the event listener on that UL,
right?
And it would expand on your click, and then still when you had the LIs, it would just look at the target of that.
Yes. So you need to have conditional logic because it's going to be the same handler for both of those, basically. Actually, it wouldn't be the same handler, but they're going to fire at the same time. That's that event stacking thing that someone asked about. You're not limited how many event listeners you can add to a DOM element. You can add 20 different event listeners. You can add 20 different click listeners. So I can have one for, nope, I want to expand and contract this nav. And you can have another one for, this one is a like a delegator for all of its children. But in both cases, you're going to need conditional logic in it to make sure that you're actually getting the thing that you think you're getting. Other questions?
So that'd be like if you had a mouse over event and a click event, you would handle that both in the UL right there?
Could, yeah. All right, let's get concrete with this. Do some practice. So I would like you to not follow along with this part. I'm just gonna throw together some HTML and CSS for us, and then I'll push it up to GitHub and you can clone it down. We'll do the next part together. So there we go. All right, so I'm gonna make some index and app.js. Cool. So sanity check myself, make sure this is all wired up okay. All right, slick. So I will repoify this. And the number of like stupid crybabies on the internet freaking out about the GitHub redesign. I'm over it.
Wouldn't a site redesign be a good thing if you're interested in front-end development? Because it means there's more people needed for it.
It's so like one of the specific things that people are mad about is that this stuff moved over to the side and it was on top. Like it's good. This was a lot of noise. Like none of their design decisions were bad. Or someone was all pissy about like the README isn't as wide. That has nothing to do with readability. Like it's still, I counted last night, it averages about 10 words. It's like pretty decent for long form text. So dumb babies, dumb babies. You changed my thing. All right, in chat, I've got the repo for you. Go ahead and clone that one down.
So they made some of it responsive and some of it not.
It's always like about as responsive as it's always been. Like, there's not a whole lot of shit you can really do with a GitHub repo on your phone. But even still, like, I don't know what's so bad about that. Looks fine to me. All right, so I want you to see if you can. So let's do this first. Let's do the non-bubbling approach. I want you to try to add an event listener for every single individual LI. You shouldn't do it 7 times. Use like some kind of looping construct for it. But see what you can do to add an event listener to each of those. Go. You can have it console log something or alert something or whatever. Something that lets you know that it worked. All right, pencils down. Slack me the JavaScript that you wrote for that. If it's not done, doesn't work, don't care. Just show me what you got. Well done, Adrian. Looking good. All right, cool. So, a couple things. One, so a few people do this. Well, they did something like, all right, well, the LIs are document.query selector all LI, and LIs add event listener click, and then something like that. So let's see what happens if we do that. Let's see. LIs.add event listener is not a function. What the fuck? Why doesn't that work?
Because the LIs is an array of HTML things.
Almost. It's almost an array of nodes. Do we know what it actually is?
The node list.
A node list. This is also like a mod 3-ish kind of topic. But all complex, come on, man. There we go. All complex types in JavaScript are ultimately objects. Some of them are more specific, like a function. Function is a type of object. An array is a type of object. And a node list is a type of object. A node list is not an array. They have different things that they can do. For example, node list doesn't have reduce. Node list doesn't have map. It's missing a couple things that arrays have that node lists doesn't have that arrays do have. Node list has for each. I think that exists, but otherwise not quite the same thing. That's an inheritance thing, by the way. Inheritance works a little bit different in JavaScript than it does in Ruby, but conceptually, you can think of that as a big less than sign. Also, if you need to turn it into an array, you can do that with li's but an array. A couple different ways. You do capital A array from, like that, or what everybody else does. Make an array and spread it in. But point being, we have to iterate through these and then add the event listeners to each DOM node that comes back. That'd be something like li's for each, and then for each li, we do all this stuff. Like that. Let's see what happens there. All right, much less noisy. Pew, pew, pew. All right, it's firing off. I could even get its text back by doing something like event.target.textContent. Pew, 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 pew. All right, so that's regular event listener stuff. No delegation. So I want you to follow along with this part. We're going to set the, delete all this. We're going to set this up where we're only doing one event listener on the UL. So we'll do something like UL is document.querySelector UL, and we'll add the event listener to that UL. Something kind of like that. So if we did that right, something got clicked, something got clicked, something got clicked. So I want you to get this far, and then I want you to spend some time trying to figure out how could you tell what got clicked? How could you tell that the LI got clicked and not the UL? Because you can click on just the UL. So look at that that UL. The stuff in the orange and the stuff in the green, that's not part of an LI. That's just owned by the UL. So what does it mean if I click there, an event fired? How do I tell JavaScript that that wasn't a UL and it doesn't need to handle it? So play around with this event, explore it, go down through some of the nesting, see if you can find something that would give you a hint. I'm gonna put a couple minutes on the clock. Go. Cool. Give me some ideas. What did you find when you were exploring that event?
I was messing around in the dev tools and I found that there is an event listener section where you can examine your click event. And I was kind of going through there to see if there was any way to tell what actually has the event handler on it. And there's a checkbox for ancestors that I unchecked, but then everything disappeared. So I didn't get as far as I wish I had.
All right. Anybody else find something?
Parent element?
Parent element. Cool. What was in parent element?
It had UL, and then it had all the exact same options as the LI did.
Very interesting. So these, so let's take a look at what an event is more abstractly. We look at the MDN for events. Oops, let me go back to the first one. You'll hear this term event interface. So every event has like this kind of stuff, like bubbles. Where is bubbles? Every kind of event has that. There's more specific kinds of events, like this one is a mouse event. Mouse events have things like these offsets and these screen things. That's how many pixels to the left and how many pixels down my mouse was when I clicked on that. DOM content loaded, that's also an event. That doesn't have pixel coordinates. So mouse events have these extra things like client X and client Y and page and screen and that kind of stuff. All right, let's take a look at the target. Okay, so the target, well, that's just a DOM node. Anybody find anything in the target that might help them out? Oh, that's interesting.
Text content, inner HTML, all those things all have what the text content is.
Yeah. Anybody find this node name?
Oh.
Weird. I wonder if that's different if I click on an LI or if I click on the UL. If I refresh this, nothing in the console. I click on the UL, I get that event. I click on the LI, I get that event. So for this one, I go down into the target and take a look at its node name, UL. Weird. If I go to this other one, go down to the target, and the node name is LI. That sounds like something I might be able to do some kind of conditional logic or something with. Questions? All right, so now I'd like you to try to implement a delegation pattern here so that you can, it'll only fire on the LIs and it'll maybe also log the text that was part of that. Give that a shot. Go.
Can you repeat that real quick? Sorry.
Yes. So given this, this will work with the UL. I want it to only fire on the LIs. And I want it to also say what the text of the LI is. So in other words, if I click here, nothing should happen. If I click there, it should log thing 3. Go. All right, pencils down. Slack me what you got. Even if it doesn't work, didn't finish, whatever. Let me see it. And Lynn, that is my favorite background image you've done yet. Nice, Bryce. Good job, Bob. Oh, I know I got some more coming. Send it over. Cool. So, ta-da, delegated event. So if I go back over here, all right, click over here. Nothing's happening. Hell yeah. Thing 1, thing 6, thing 4. Sick.
So if you had a list of like anchor tags, you could dive even deeper and pull out where they were actually linking to.
Absolutely. Remember, event.target, that's just a DOM element. You know what else we can do with DOM elements? Document is isn't the only thing you can run query selector on. You can run it on any element. So yeah, I pull out some anchor from that. I change its href. I do whatever I want. I do what I want. Pretty cool. Okay, one last challenge. So that works. There's a question about event stacking. What if I do want to also have something happen when I'm clicking on the UL, like expand and contract it or something? How would I also handle that?
Just throw in an else and change what the node name should be to UL or something.
Yeah, I can do an else. I can do an else if. I can also just add another event listener. There's no limit to the number of event listeners I can add. Got. So if I go back over to my browser, UL, LI. And what's nice about that, instead of if elsing it and making some like complicated logic tree, is now I can extract those into functions. So I can put that UL over here. I can put this LI over here. And that is some sexy code. What's wrong, Miles? It's not Mama's turn yet, baby. Pretty cool. So, one more kind of tricky challenge. Let's say there's all kinds of things in my LI, including maybe like more LIs. So maybe these LIs look more like, oh, they've got some div in here that has something there. Maybe it's got its own list of shit. How do I know that I clicked on this LI or this LI? Or shoot, the target's going to keep changing in there also. So the target might, the target's node name might come back as H2. Check that out. Oops. So like nothing's firing there, but I'm technically inside the LI. And if I go over here and try to handle that, what is the node name there? H2? Any guesses what else I could do to accommodate for this more complex structure? I'll give you a hint. It doesn't need to be the node name. It just needs to be something I can use to uniquely identify this container. I'll give you another hint. Lynn kind of, well, actually, Lynn didn't tell you that. Lynn DM'd me this. Lynn is halfway there. Anything else I could do? Maybe even involving changing the HTML?
I'll add my ID.
What if each of these LIs has a class? Does that give you any ideas?
You can just select it out. You can get element by ID or get element by class name or something like that.
Oh, actually, hang on. The thing I'm trying to show you is way more complicated than I thought it was when I started this. Never mind. But what you would do in this case is you can go back up through those parent nodes. Like, all right, so I click on this. That's the H2. So there's the H2. I can also go down to its target. And from its target, I can get its parent element or parent node. And I can keep iterating through that. That one's a div. All right, well, what's your parent node? Who is your daddy and what does he do? An LI. Oh, interesting. Does this LI have a class list? Why, yes, it does. and I can check for the existence of a class. So I go, all right, if one of your parent nodes has this class, that counts too. Just some kind of logic to figure out what thing we're actually clicking on. That's event delegation. Cool. Ask me some questions. Going once. Going twice. Sold. Thank you all for playing.